For over half a century, humans have endeavored to make business a force for good. But is the movement working? Or is it time to explore a new path forward? Welcome to Less Talk, More Action. We are your hosts, Joel Caesar and Owen Barrett, experts in clean energy, net zero real estate, decarbonization, and entrepreneurship. In each episode, we ask provocative questions and share stories from the front lines of sustainability with leaders in science, tech, and business, taking real action to design a cleaner, better future. Thanks for joining the conversation. Now, let's get to work. Welcome to Less Talk, More Action podcast. My name is Joel Caesar, the world's undisputed voice of building decarbonization. Joining me as always is Owen Barrett, the self-proclaimed Adam Newman of Green Building. Today's guest, Josh Dorfman, a climate entrepreneur, author, and media personality, CEO of Supercool, a media company covering real-world climate solutions that cut carbon, increase profits, and enhance modern life. He was a cool guest. I stopped his bio there. He's done a lot of stuff. He continues to lead another really interesting climate tech business, building supply chains with SpaceX guys. So you can see why he's a cool media personality and definitely someone that we will be out there rooting for. What'd you think?
Yeah, I thought he was a great guest. Just a good combination of, first of all, super optimistic, which is obviously, what we're going for here. But then being an entrepreneur himself in the clean tech space and hosting a podcast. I think, not to toot my own horn, but I think guests or hosts make the best guests. So he was a great guest and just had a super powerful message.
Yeah, no doubt. And this combo of a media personality, celebrating other entrepreneurs, doers, while at the same time doing his own thing, building stuff. It's like, these are the best, you just said guests, but these are the best people to talk to because they're building businesses, they're on the front lines, they're tackling challenges, and at the same time sharing those messages with the world and other entrepreneurs. And it's like stuff we need more of, right?
Yeah, it's a good show.
Well, that was fun, but before we dive into our conversation with Josh, let's dive into a segment we're calling Solar Corner with Owen, the self-proclaimed most knowledgeable, smartest person in the world when it comes to multifamily solar. I think you've said that on a previous episode.
Yeah,
so since you are, and since you're such an expert and we all get to listen to you here on the show, we're going to learn from you. So let's talk solar. Very much in the news these days with everything happening in the big, beautiful bill and what might be the future of tax credits. And even before all this at the federal level, there's issues in California and net metering. So this is a world I know you definitely have your ear to the ground towards. And recently one of our followers, a fan of the show, sent me an article about Mosaic filing for bankruptcy, and the article talking about is this a canary in the coal mine for what's going to happen with solar? So all that teed up, let's hear your perspective. What's the future of solar?
Well, I don't know that Mosaic's failure was related to everything going on with Trump's big bill. But I do think it's a canary in the coal mine. I think solar companies have history of taking on too much debt. Rates go up and they get in big trouble. We saw it with SunPower. Now we see it with Mosaic. We're seeing it with Sonova as well. I think though,
let me unpack that a little bit. So these are like, Mosaic is a big lender and was a fintech company. So got a lot of venture capital funding, grew. And then what do you mean? Took on a bunch of debt and then...
Yeah, but they have warehouse lines. They're giving loans. Generally, most of these companies are giving loans to homeowners. So they have warehouse lines of credit. So when rates go up, solar doesn't make sense anymore.
What's a warehouse line of credrit for the
It's where you get a bunch of money committed from like a bank or, another lender to lend. We're exploring it right now.
It's like lending to lending.
Yeah, essentially. You put an arbitrage, so you arbitrage a rate, you're borrowing it at 5%, you lend it at 7%. Now you're a fintech company, there's cash flow to the homeowner. But if now you're borrowing at a rate of 7% and you have to lend it at 9%, now the cash flow to the homeowner going solar gets eroded. So the homeowner says no. And now your whole business model kind of implodes. So, it's a tough spot, but I think I appreciate the optimism that I see on LinkedIn about the solar industry is robust. We're going to figure out a way around tax credits going away. I completely disagree. I think you're going to see 50% of every solar company go under in the next 2 years if the tax credit goes away like it's slated to. I mean, we see it all the time. You know, the IRRs on solar outside of New England and California are pretty skinny. The return metrics are skinny, like so skinny that companies have a hard time deciding whether or not they want to move forward. If
And
you
that's
take away,
because New England and California electricity rates are high. That's why it works there the
yeah,
most.
that's why the returns are better. If you take away a 30% incentive, your financial metrics take a huge hit. And now you're below the return hurdle of companies, homeowners, whoever it might be. So
Well, explain
I,
that real quick. The 30% credit. So right now, homeowner or business installs solar and they get a 30% tax credit, right? That's how it works, and that's what's being rolled back.
yeah, so you install a $10,000 system on your home. When you file your taxes, you get a $3,000 tax credit, dollar for dollar tax credit. Works the same way for businesses. It gets a little bit more complicated with transferability, but same rough economics.
But when you're selling that example, the 10,000, you go to the homeowner and be like, "Look, this is going to be 10,000, but we're underwriting this as if it's 7. So here's the return on the investment as if it's a
It's
$7,000
Yeah.
capex
Now
project."
run that same financial model as a $10,000 expenditure. The numbers get way worse.
Okay, so you're saying 50% of companies are going to go out of business and residential solar is going to crater. Maybe is that short term though? I mean, across the country, will we not continue to see electricity rates go up in
Well,
every region? And
yeah,
we'll continue to see the cost of solar because of it's just the trend it's on as a technology continue to decrease. So at some point, maybe that comes back without the tax credit. If I'm like
no, yeah, 100%.
playing pro chump here, like
I
this
think
doesn't
no,
you
I
don't
think
need it anymore.
unless you get a bunch of nuclear online, unless you figure out how to get natural gas generators online faster, like drill is not a short-term solution, right? That takes a long
No.
time. So, yeah, I think electricity prices are going to like skyrocket all across the country. But that like chain reaction is going to take time. We're going to have companies go under, then the economics are going to get better over time. So it's going to be a lot of turbulence for the solar industry. Everything's not going to happen at the same time. Like electricity prices are not going to go up fast enough to offset the loss of the tax credit. I don't think.
It'll take some time,
I
probably,
think
right?
yes, but so I mean to go back to the optimistic side, like we have through the end of 2026 as it's written now to get at
E-
least 60% of the tax credit.
Even
So
if this bill goes through as is.
that's how it's written right now. That was like the most recent. So the tax credit stays intact for 2025. Projects started in 2025. Projects started in 2026. You get 60% of the tax credit. Project started in 2027, you get 20% of the tax credit, and then it's gone in 2028 when we're going to get a new administration, so it may come back. But this is
Yeah.
the problem with the solar industry. This is why people call it the solar coaster, because it's just there's never any stability. That's not
Well,
good for any industry.
I learned a lot here, including a new term, the solar coaster, from the world's greatest expert on solar. We'll have to make
In
this
multifamily,
we'll have to make this a
solar in
recurring bit.
multifamily.
Solar Corner with Owen. Well, that was fun. Now let's get into our show with Josh Dorfman. Joining us today is Josh Dorfman, a climate entrepreneur, author, and media personality. He is the CEO and host of Supercool, a media company covering real-world climate solutions that cut carbon, increase profits, and enhance modern life. Josh was previously the co-founder and CEO of Planted, a carbon-negative building materials manufacturer, which was named to Fast Company's list of the world's most innovative companies in 2024. He has founded 2 modern design sustainable furniture companies, directed Vine.com, an Amazon e-commerce business specializing in natural and organic products, and served as the CEO of The Collider, the nation's first innovation center for climate resilience and adaptation. Additionally, Josh was previously known as the Lazy Environmentalist, a media brand he developed into an award-winning television series on Sundance Channel, a daily radio show on Sirius XM, and 2 popular books. So, Josh, welcome to the Let's Talk More Action podcast.
Well, beautiful. Thank you for having me here.
Well, Josh, you after that intro, man, you seem like someone who gets stuff done, likes to get to work, as do we here on the show. We start all our guests with the same first question. How are you taking action to make the world a better place?
Well, I did pick my kid up from school today, so that was very, very, very positive. But before that, I was doing the work I do every day, which these days is centered on Supercool. And we're really in the business of identifying solutions to climate that are real, that are de-risked, that are scaling up, that are available to business leaders, policymakers, that someone could bring to their boss and actually not get fired because it may save the company money. We're really trying to kind of move the needle on climate solutions that we feel are underway, but underrepresented in the media landscape today to drive change.
Yeah, and I like it. It's kind of similar to what we're trying to do here at the Last Talk More Action. But what's one of the cooler technologies that you've come across or that you've spoken about on within your network?
The exciting thing for me about Supercool is it just depends on the week, because I find it all, frankly, just really, really interesting. This week we had we dove into the concept of food waste, how you actually address that. And we interviewed a guy named Oded Omer, who's the CEO of Wasteless, an Israeli company that's now a global company, got started almost a decade ago. And Wasteless said, hey, we're going to tackle waste in food, which is a massive, massive problem. Like, if food were a country, it would have the third most carbon emissions behind the US and China. I mean, it's staggering. Wow. Oded's a tech entrepreneur, and so he took a look at what was happening in grocery stores, and he said, this is a crazy thing where all these grocery stores are racing toward this expiration date, right? And as you get close to the expiration date, like on the last day, you slash prices by 40 to 50%. The stuff may or may not sell, but you kill your margin if it does, and it's like a terrible, terrible solution. So he invented this notion of dynamic discounting. Let's start to discount along the way. Maybe we'll drop the price of Chobani yogurt 2.4% on a given day and show a consumer like, hey, if you buy it now, right, you'll start to save a little, or it's going to be a little bit more down the road. And he just figured out a tech solution that's being adopted by some of the largest retailers in the country and the world, frankly, to fix food waste through a very elegant tech solution that actually makes retailers more money. Saves profit.
Joel and I met in grad school 10, 12 years ago, and at this particular grad school, the Bren School of Environmental Science, you have a master's thesis. And so you work, it's a group project. It's supposed to be very real world oriented. I was in the eco-entrepreneurship track, so myself and two students also focused on food waste, and this was in 2012. That's what our thesis was about. Our solution was to try and set up vermicomposting, so on-site composting with worms at schools is what we were thinking of, because they have huge waste streams, organic waste streams. It didn't work for a number of reasons, mainly because we didn't want to be glorified trash people and the work itself was disgusting. But since that thesis, there's this business model that's come out, and then there's also these really cool counter composting units. I think that, Joel, you were evaluating at Google. So
I have one. Yeah.
Yeah.
Sure Josh might have had that company on too. Mill.
It's amazing. Right, the food problem is so big, and there's so many cool solutions coming out now.
Yeah, I completely agree. It's funny when you say that particular solution, because when I had this TV show, The Lazy Environmentalist, which was more consumer focused, our pilot episode was me trying to green a family in LA that had just unbelievable amounts of waste. I mean, sneaking into the neighbor's trash to throw things away. And it was just, it was hilariously egregious. And one of the solutions that we convinced this guy to try was a worm composter that we put in his living room, which made for great TV, but total disaster. So I have a lot of, a lot of empathy and kind of, kindred spirits on that one. But yeah. Sorry, go ahead, Joel.
Well, one thing we like to point out when Owen tells these stories, and typically it's blaming some market solution or something, it often comes down to maybe Owen just wasn't a good entrepreneur, right? Is that probably the answer here?
That one I take the full blame myself. We just didn't want to, we saw what it was firsthand. We convinced UC Santa Barbara to pay for a vermicomposting unit at a local private school and did it for a year. And, it had great environmental impact, but it was disgusting. So
Well,
those are for me.
we should get Odin on this show. Sounds like a very cool guy and we're working on cool stuff. And like Owen said, Josh, I think there's synergies here to what you're trying to do, what we're trying to do, which is highlight solutions, highlight doers, entrepreneurs. You know, the name of the show here is stop asking someone else, stop expecting the government, stop wanting billionaires to do something, get your ass up and go start your own business and solve the problem you think we need to solve. So to that point, something that seems like based on your bio, your intro, you've been doing for a while. Why Supercool now? And I guess just to clarify, so Supercool is a media brand trying to bring awareness to these companies. There's no business relationship when it comes on. This is just about awareness.
There's three components to Supercool, but really it's what I would consider a modern day media company if you're going to launch a media company in 2024, 2025. So newsletter, podcast, YouTube, the digital side. We're starting to get into events and planning how we kind of create an offline component. There's, of course, some client services where we'll help, whether it's co-branded content or help doing thought leadership pieces. But the media side, as far as the podcast and who we feature, that stays. It's pretty pure. Right? It's not a pay to play. We're bringing on folks who, in my mind, the filter for who we bring on the show is this solution real and existing in the world and scaling up market, beyond out of the lab, beyond pilot stage, commercially available? If someone's listening and they were in the industry that we're covering, could they go access that solution, right? And then, of course, is it cutting carbon? What we tend to see where we lean in is when you have those two things, often you get the third piece, which is this actually makes the world better too. Like sort of subjectively based on quality of life, the way we want to live. My thought is I want to understand the solutions that exist today and those that are actually moving us to a place where the future is better than the present. And I think that's possible, and that's what we get very excited about.
So Owen, you may or may not know, is a founder and CEO of a very cool climate tech company. Maybe we should do a pitch here. Owen, is your company ready to be featured on Supercool? Convince Josh.
Yeah, we're doing this live. We're going for it. I like this.
Do it. This will be fun.
Well, we've developed a software platform that enables us to install solar on multifamily properties. So the problem with multifamily properties and solar is something called the split incentive problem. Owners usually have to pay for solar and the benefits go to tenants. We've developed a software solution that directs the financial benefit of on-site solar connected to tenant meters back to the building owner so that they can justify the CapEx cost to begin with. So we've deployed in 5 different projects and we're currently scaling.
So what I would say is that definitely sounds super cool, because that definitely sounds like a nut that's really tough to crack. And as I understand the solar industry, the market that you're going after, that's probably one of the toughest markets. I mean, for one, the reasons that you mentioned, but also just as I've come to understand it from a marketing standpoint, right? Reaching that kind of mid market, right? Where it's like a certain, okay, I'm a multifamily, maybe I have 15, who knows how many apartments, right? But like, that's just a really tough market to actually get any penetration into.
Yeah, I mean, I'd agree. I think the thing that I notice is the second that you sort of display that you don't understand the fundamentals of multifamily investing, you lose your customer. So you could be a super talented solar salesperson, but if you don't understand the intricacies of NOI and cap rates and how that adds value, you just lose them in the first minute of the conversation. And they'll engage you and continue the pitch, but I mean, they're not interested. So it takes, Joel and I were buying apartment buildings in 2016, 2017, 2018, using these apartment buildings as kind of guinea pigs of how do you actually decarbonize on-site or with on-site renewables. And it took those years of buying apartment buildings ourselves to really be able to like eloquently say what the value prop is to other owners.
And live in their shoes, which is a great platform to come from when you're trying to sell a solution for sure.
Yeah,
I love that. Have you seen also, I think I was talking to a company, I think they're based in Massachusetts, but that is working on virtual power plants and demand response also for multifamily, for the same tricky things around that dynamic of an owner of the building, multiple tenants,
I haven't, but going back to my just inability as an entrepreneur and a human in general, I applied to a job with Enernoc, which is like I'd say the biggest VPP kind of demand response company out there. After grad school, Joel didn't get it. Surprise, surprise. But I mean, the challenge with multifamily and VPPs is you need the data of when is energy being used at the apartment level, which is impossible to get right now. And that's an interesting byproduct of our installations is we get that data. So the idea is solar now, VPPs later, kind of as utilities start to incentivize those more.
Oh, that's cool. Yeah, we'll need to talk more about that.
Sounds
Joel,
super cool.
sounds like I nailed the pitch.
Yeah,
Better pitch person
I
than
like
Todd.
I like Josh's brand there. How he says, "Oh, that's super cool. That's perfect."
Oh, did I say that? Oh, really?
Yeah, I guess you're used to doing this. You're a true pro here. Well, I mean, Josh, too, like, the way I follow your posting on LinkedIn, and I think you posted recently about a Fast Company article about selling climate solutions, right? And how we should sell them effectively by not calling them climate solutions. We had a great guest on recently called Akila Kosaraju, and she's it's hard to describe her business as eloquently as she does. She's a graphic designer. She's a former architect. She helps businesses with their go-to-market strategy, and she's working with Owen's company. That's how we learned of her. And she spoke a lot about similar challenge, what you're describing, not challenge, but opportunity, and like how we communicate. And like your barrier to coming on your podcast is like they need to be scaled, they need to be commercialized. And she talked about how she works with brilliant founders, people that are in science coming out of universities who like have a product and think they're going to save the world, but like getting from that point to B, speaking to customers, as we just talked about Owen doing. So yeah, maybe we can learn from you a little bit here and all this experience, and you as a communicator, and you with connecting to all these successful companies. Educate our audience if there's some climate tech founders out there, or budding climate tech founders, that idea of like communicating to the end user and how we do this appropriately to scale this industry.
I think the entrepreneur too, right? The person working within the ESG department that has to
The entrepreneur speaking internally.
Yeah, they got to convince the CFO to do some climate tech project.
So kind of with those two different ideas in mind, I do think, well, let me say this first for founders. What I've seen just with tech founders in general, maybe just entrepreneurs, a lot of entrepreneurs, is they fall in love with their product, right? They fall in love with their solution. And so there's often you're having a conversation, especially, I've just seen it mostly with first-time entrepreneurs, but not necessarily, where you say, what are you working on? And they tell you about the product, and you're like, okay, well, what's the business, right? Like, because your product is not your business. And if I'm an investor, right, I'm not investing in your product. I want to understand your company. And I think that starts to carry over for tech companies when they're trying to go to market, right? And they're trying to talk to their customers about the tech. And you see that with a lot of solar companies, and you see it with solar companies who are now trying to sell batteries, right? Where they're still like, oh, let me tell you about this like really cool battery that has X number of kilowatt hours, right? But like a homeowner doesn't care about kilowatt hours. Like, what is a homeowner? The homeowner doesn't even probably care about the battery, but the homeowner, the homeowner does care about, there's a lot more storms, the power seems to be going out a little more frequently, can I have peace of mind, right? Or like, can I get some control over my costs? So we had Mary Paolo on the show, CEO of Sunrun, and this first quarter of 2025, their battery attachment rates for new solar customers was 69%. So it's like incredible, double the average of the industry. And this was her point. She was talking about this. She's like, we really try to reshift our focus to talk about the benefits, the results, the outcomes for the customer. We used to talk about solar, but that's early adopters who actually care about the panels. We definitely don't really talk about the batteries because we're trying to reach a much broader market here. And so you see, like, and then where climate tech founders get tripped up is once they stop talking about the tech, then they start talking about climate, and it's like, well, I might love this, but I'll give you an example. We had this guy on the show, this company, Brainbox AI. They figured out this AI-powered solution to enable buildings or building managers to reduce the amount of energy HVAC units used by 25% and cut the overall carbon emissions by 40%. And the AI is sick, and it can tell you like, okay, in 6
Didn't it have
hours
an
from
exit?
now,
Did someone buy them?
they were bought by Train.
Yeah, I saw that.
Because they're in like 15,000 buildings, right? And Sam, the CEO, comes on the show. He's like, look, we look at like the wind speed around the building. We look at the carbon intensity on the grid. We look at the price of energy at any given moment. And because we know who's going to be in a space 6 hours from now, we can kind of modulate how we either cool or heat that space so that we can save money and run our model. And his point to me was like, because I was asking him, who do you sell into? And he was saying, well, we want to sell ideally into the CFO if we can, but there's other folks along that value chain who are interested, who we can serve. He's like, but what you have to understand is nobody wakes up in the morning thinking, man, what I could really use is some AI in my building, right? And it's like, so stop talking about the tech. You talk about it, of course, but it's not what's going to drive the sale. And I think that's really the point. The thing I would say about for entrepreneurs is, it's the same principles, right? How do I identify what my CFO or my facilities manager or whomever, like, what do they need to do their job better to be successful at what they're doing? And does this sustainability solution that I am trying to bring to the table, does it meet their needs as well? If it does, you're going to have a really productive conversation. If it doesn't, you're not. You're just simply not. And so really thinking through that frame is very important to drive change.
I finally got hired out of grad school as an energy manager for a Fortune 100 company. And I came into this, at the time ESG wasn't even a term, but I got pulled into an ESG team to pitch our C-suite on multi-million-dollar clean tech projects. And they said, Owen, like we can't figure out how to get the lighting project approved or the solar project approved or the fuel cell project approved. And my background prior to grad school is finance. So I noticed in their presentations, they were hammering the climate, they were hammering the tech, and then the CFO would ask questions about the financials. What's the simple payback, discounted payback, whatever the metric may be, and they would just stumble all over the place. So this was 10 years before we just heard what you said, but I channeled that exact sentiment and led with the financials, touched on sort of the climate and the tech, and was able to like reposition the whole department into, here's a way to really save money. And for the ESG team and their reporting, there's all this ancillary data that we can report to different reporting requirements, but it's really touching on why does it matter for the company, which almost always comes down to dollars.
Yeah.
I love how this has become a puff piece of Owen's career here. This is, we got Josh on.
Keep it going.
It's very impressive. It's really.
This is my favorite podcast yet, Joel.
I'm really enjoying. Hearing about your background.
I'll just throw in a little of my experience here too, because the joke you just made about no one wakes up thinking I need to put AI in my buildings. Like I work for a company now that sells AI to building owners. It's a company's called Cambio. It's a sustainability data analytics platform that identifies retrofit opportunities using AI. And I lead the growth team, and I often tell our team that's going to market, we don't, and it's very similar dynamic, right? Like we have this incredible tech team, like the product's amazing. That's what got me there. We would have sold to someone like me in my job at Google because I was managing sustainability across this huge portfolio and could have definitely used a product like we have. But I often tell them we sell outcomes, not features. And it's such a simple way to think about it, but you got to put yourself in that owner's shoes, and you got to sit in their life, and that's how you're going to be able to deliver a message that brings value to them and hopefully gets them to say yes, right?
Totally. And I think it certainly transcends startups. Like two other quick examples that were really meaningful to me. We had this guy, Eric Corey-Fried, on the show.
I know Eric. Yeah, I've seen him speak for years in LA. Yep.
Organic architect was, as he says, like he was practicing, green architecture in the 1900s, right? And so now he's at Canon Design, and he's at a global firm, and a firm that just keeps winning awards around sustainability. I think they were Metropolis magazines. I forget the exact award, but they were recognized as the premier kind of green design, sustainability focused firm. And so he moved there. He has a bigger platform, and so we brought him on the show. And if you know him, you kind of know his humor, right? Yeah. And I was saying, okay, you've done this with like Cleveland Clinic, you got the Mayo Clinic, or you have all these, you got these health clients, and like, how are you getting this done? He's like, well, we stopped asking for permission. We just do it. because when I tell them about the outcomes they're going to get, right, from we're going to use healthier materials. We're going to take the cancer-causing materials out of cancer clinics, right? Wouldn't you like that? Everyone's like, yes, okay, well, leave it to me to go do the biomimicry stuff or whatever my toolkit is, right? I'm going to deliver outcomes for you that are going to serve your needs. And I just haven't heard that in the kind of that architectural construction engineering frame that way. I loved it. Like, we just stopped asking for permission because the toolkit's already great. It's going to deliver value. The other one I would say is I had read about this, it's an experiment really that was run probably now 5 or 6 years ago with Austin, Denver, New Orleans, Pittsburgh, and Providence to see if we could break this dynamic in America where it's really hard to build bike lanes. It's just like almost impossible. What should take months takes decades. Even when the mayor is excited, even when city council's on board, even when there's budget allocated, it just still gets bogged down. And so we had on this guide, read about Kyle Wagenschutz, who had championed and led this project, and they succeeded. They did like 300 miles of like safe, protected bike lanes in a matter of months instead of a matter of decades. He said a lot of things about his playbook, but one of the things he said that really struck me, he's like, yeah, you got to get the bicyclists on board, but they're on board. You don't have to spend a lot of time with them. People you got to get on board with the car drivers. Right? Because like if the car drivers get on board, then you clear the runway and no one's showing up in City Hall and slowing things down. Like, great, how do you do that? And so he said a few things that were really interesting, but he's like, look, you appeal to the outcomes they want. Wouldn't you like a less stressful commute? I would love a less stressful commute. Well, if we take all the bikes and we put them in their own lane, right, and they're away from you, that's going to make your commute less stressful and others. And I was like, oh my gosh. That sounds so simple. He's like, it is, but it's not intuitive for the people who are championing, right, that effort to go talk to car drivers, right? And so it's all comes back to the same thing, but it's about benefits, outcomes, results, and going to talk to the folks who need to be convinced that it's in their self-interest.
I think we should just end the podcast there. That's like the greatest thing I ever said.
Mic drop, yeah. Well, Josh, I'd love to learn more about your past. So Supercool sounds like a place we all should be learning from more. I know I already do. Hopefully Owen and our guests now can continue supporting you because, I think similar message, like we said, there are plenty of solutions out there. We need to get them deployed. We need to get them adopted at scale. And it sounds like you're a big part of, trying to expand that market. But, when I asked like, why Supercool, why now? And I think you gave us a great answer, but what about your past? I mean, you were building companies. You were in like physical work, like with Planted. So, I would just say personally, I know like right now I'm working on a growth team for a SaaS product and it's super interesting. I'm learning a lot and I think it brings value. But like in the past, I've built buildings and I've watched things come up out of the ground and looked at high performance, sustainable buildings and said, look, I was a part of that. That's cool. And I miss that, like the tangible touching of the work. And, Owen's installing solar panels, great, tangible, outcome-based work. So, yeah, do you miss it? What do you miss about your past?
Well, I really appreciate where I am, and I do appreciate what you're saying, Joel, in terms of that kind of more physical, building different kinds of businesses or different kinds of products. The way I got to Supercool was really this transition for me that, probably for a bunch of reasons, my interests and where I felt I could drive more impact and what wanted to play was more on this business to business side, because the early part of my career was more business to consumer. I mentioned the Lazy Environmentalist TV show. That was obviously a very consumer driven brand, working at Amazon on like Vine.com, like an online Whole Foods, trying to make those types of products more accessible. Before Supercool, so I should go, like 6 or 7 years ago, I started was my second modern design sustainable furniture company. And I was like building, or I had a factory in North Carolina, and I had this vision to create beautiful, sustainably designed furniture in America at an attainable price point. Like kind of this really hard thing to accomplish, and direct to consumer provided a way to do that. I could take out the margin that I'd have to provide to wholesalers, and we could go direct. And I was having some success. It was called Simbly, like simple assembly, and it was kind of IKEA style, knockdown, flat pack furniture you assemble yourself. The pandemic hit. At first, like other furniture retailers, that was great for us. People were buying desks and different products from us. And then we got shut down. Our factories started to shut down. And more than anything else, I couldn't get material. And I was using this very high grade Forest Stewardship Council, FSC certified plywood. When I could get it, the quality was going down, the price was going up. And it just got me thinking, like, man, is FSC wood, as good as that may be, is that the best we can do? Is there nothing more sustainable?
Ooh, I got a lot of thoughts on this, but you keep going.
Okay, so I was kind of just going around and around on that, and someone I knew, I'd been in North Carolina at that time already for 8 years. I was living in Asheville. Someone I knew said, hey, there's a guy down in Durham you should talk to. He's got a little manufacturing thing going as well. I took a look at his site, and I was like, nope, don't need to talk to him, because I'm very kind of brand aesthetically driven. And I was like, we don't have anything in common, so it's a hard pass. But this guy, Wada, was very persistent. So eventually we get on the phone and he says, man, you're doing this great thing, all sustainable. And then I start complaining about materials. He's like, well, what would you do? And I'm like, I don't know, maybe we can make materials out of hemp. And he's like, oh, I've got 6 trash bags of hemp in my garage. And I was like, okay, well, what? Like, who are you? What are you talking about? And he's like, oh, I just moved here. I'd spent 8 years at SpaceX. I was running the team on the life support systems team that kept astronauts alive on the Dragon spacecraft. I was like, and you moved to Raleigh? Like, how is this? What? He's like, well, I'm an engineer. I put together a spreadsheet of like all the cities in America, and then the columns going across of all of my criteria. Raleigh was at the top. We moved here. There's a lot of trees, so we like it. We're here. So I was thinking about materials coming from SpaceX. SpaceX folks were thinking about carbon removal. For a number of different, Elon was talking about carbon removal. In fact, he was just getting ready to launch this X Prize around carbon removal. And so we quickly kind of coalesced and said, man, like, it would be really interesting if we could find some biomass that grew faster than trees, had utility, right? So we could actually turn it into some product. And if we're going to replace trees, well, where did trees go when they're cut down? And it's like, well, lumber. Where does lumber go? Homes. Okay. Let's go talk to home builders and see if we made something out of hemp with a SpaceX team where we could like make a factory and have something engineered. Would that be interesting? And so, that's really that's how we started. And we just started, that's literally how we started. 2 weeks later, I met Wada for the first time. We just started calling on builders, figuring it out. Probably 2 months after that, we incorporated.
That's Planted? That's what became Planted?
Yeah, and that's basically what Planted does. We don't use hemp. We did test a lot with hemp. We ended up, we tested tons of different biomass, and we ended up identifying a fast-growing grass similar to bamboo. It's not bamboo. That we actually had to invent an entirely new commercial ag supply chain for because it didn't exist, but it met all of our criteria. It grew like 8 to 9 times faster than trees. It's very hardy. It's got great fiber. You can slice it and make an incredible product. Far superior to plywood, far superior to oriented strand board, which has replaced plywood as the the structural panels for homes. And that's what we do today. We make these panels out of grass. And with the SpaceX team, we built a first of its kind, entirely electric production technology so that we can pull carbon down very quickly with this very fast growing renewable grass, and then run it through this mill that has no smokestack so we don't give the carbon back, and we effectively lock carbon away in new homes.
Man, I love the mission of what you're doing. Obviously, it's super important, but I also love just the importance of like serendipity in that story. This one guy told you that you should talk to this person, and you didn't want to, but he was persistent. Like, that is such a common theme in entrepreneurship, and you got to be open to those connections and those conversations because it can just like 10x your business model.
Yeah, I think if you're starting a company and you're not doing that, you're doing yourself an incredible disservice.
Yeah.
You have to look for the serendipity. Call it whatever you want, right? The synchronicity.
Yeah.
You have to lean into those things, for sure.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah, and I'm also impressed. I didn't realize after reading your bio this was current. So you're doing Supercool, and you're also the CEO of this very cool biomaterials
Not anymore.
company.
So
Okay.
not anymore. I stepped down. So I was so I co-founded it. I was the CEO for the first three years. We did a $2 million seed. We did roughly around a $15 million Series A. We built a relationship. Our most strategic relationship and commercial relationship is with D.R. Horton, the largest home builder in the country. And so we got to know them very early on in the journey. They followed a lot of our progress. Just toward the tail end of 2024, we got an order from D.R. Horton for 10 million panels. That's about roughly 90,000 homes Yeah, it's a lot of grass. It's going to take us a little bit of time to fulfill, but we really had proven a lot in terms of the material, the company, the supply chain, the technology that we were bringing to market to, in a very short, condensed amount of time, create a lot of really positive upside for us, for our investors, for the mission that we're trying to fulfill with Planted.
Are the DR Hortons of the world and similar companies, are they adopting your product because of price, environmental attributes, a combination of both? Like, what's driving them to
brand,
use?
maybe, yeah.
Yeah, we're very committed, and I think with some of these early orders that we've got of this magnitude, to being at a place where this will get us to, I don't necessarily want to say price parity, but price control, right? Depending on what is we would argue it's a better product. It's more moisture resistant. We're testing to see. We think there's some fire retardation benefits as well. But it really gets us to that place where we feel like we have a lot of control over being very viable on price in the market. In this instance, I think sustainability helped open the door. But I think it was also the notion of, here's a team coming into an industry that hasn't changed, right? That's just really been the same. And and I think having the SpaceX, certainly brand and Imprimatur tied to what we were doing is incredibly beneficial. I think you get a lot of leeway and latitude, and kind of it's like you're made in a little bit in a way, right? You're like made. Oh, you did your time there, so you guys know what you're doing. Making an OSB replacement can't be harder than keeping astronauts alive in space, right? So like when you communicate that to someone, it goes a long way. But what I would say, I think it's a combination of factors. And I think what's interesting in home building is, yes, you do have, of course, all of these green builders and all these many wonderful sustainable builders at one end of the market, and then you have this middle market that really doesn't pay any attention to sustainability, right? It's other criteria, probably mostly price or probably mostly price, whatever price point they're trying to hit, right? And then at the top end, you have public companies that probably partially because they're public, they have a different set of stakeholders. Sustainability is more prioritized. Then there's also things happening around regulatory environment, tax code, opportunities to do net zero ready homes. I mean, other incentives when you're at that scale that really are, as you know, are material to the bottom line. I think there's a host of factors, but when you're at that tippy top, like a DR, like a Lennar, like a Pulte, you just have to think about your supply chain differently, because you just need to have a lot more control and a lot more visibility and a lot more long-term planning, because you're just building so much. And I think those things, the fact that we're entirely domestic, the fact that this factory is modular, we have a lot of flexibility in how we build the supply chain. It's vertically integrated, so we really, once we got it all figured out, we do control a lot of our own destiny. I think a lot of those things has helped to create that confidence.
Do you guys grow the grass, or is that a supplier relationship?
Well, like I said, there's no supply chain. So
Yeah.
we found this grass through the North Carolina Department of Ag as we were just looking for anything. We were testing everything. And testing is like, we had a little press. The presses got a little bit bigger over time, but tiny little presses. And the other thing I'd say that would get investors excited, even customers potentially excited, they would come to our really dingy little prototype shop in Durham, because the other beautiful thing about SpaceXers is they're dirt cheap. And of course, investors love that, right? They're trained in a certain methodology. You never over-engineer. You don't spend money if you can avoid it. At least the ones I was working with, that was the point of view. And so WADA, when we raised our $2 million seed round and we're all moving full-time to Durham to really drive the business, we get to the prototype shop, and he had, when you're making this material, you're slicing things, you're making very thin, you put a little resin on it, and you then press it, see, okay, how does it do? So the mixer he was using was a 50-gallon used pickle barrel that he had bought for, maybe $20-30. And then he went out and bought a used treadmill off Craigslist, like an old one, for like $150. And he figured out how to bolt this, barrel to the treadmill, put some wheels on it, run the thing on fat burn, and that's your mixer, right? So investors show up and they're like, oh, SpaceX, yeah, where's the shiny stuff, and then they see this, and at first the dissonance is like on their, is resonant on their face, and then they light up and they're like, oh my God, this is the most, yes, like here's my check,
This
so
is actually the brilliance.
yeah. That's
Being
actually
scrappy.
the brilliance.
Yeah.
Now, so we do have our own tissue culture lab, and there's so many things that you had to do. But again, I just think with a space like SpaceXers are really worth studying and emulating in this regard, because their view is like, it's like, oh my gosh, there's no supply chain. We have to go actually stand up an entire supply chain. There's no one to call and just be like, hey, can I get 5,000 tons of this grass, please? Like, it just did not exist. That alone is probably a business. And a tissue culture lab is not an easy thing to stand up. We probably have the largest tissue culture lab now in North Carolina. And that would have stymied a lot of entrepreneurs who just been like, oh, forget it. Like, how am I going to do that? Never mind everything else. And these guys are like, it's not harder than building a rocket ship. I'm sure we can figure that out, So it's just a whole nother level of training and attitude.
Yeah.
I try to pull in my life that I once ran Google's net zero program, and that's like my street cred message. I don't think it has the same effect as the SpaceX guys.
That's cool, that's cool. And I think, like, for me, it's like, oh yeah, Amazon, whatever, and it's like, okay, can I get a little kind of Amazon brand halo?
Yeah.
But it's just very hard to touch, right? Like a place like coming out of a place like that.
Sounds like it. That's a cool story. Well, Josh, it's been fascinating. I've learned a lot. We're going to be rooting for you, but we got to wrap up. We always finish with the same question. So, in a movement, sustainability, climate tech, environmentalism, where sometimes we can focus too much on the pessimism and the bad news, we like to end the show with optimism. So what gives you hope for the future?
All right. Well, what jumps to mind for me and gives me hope is that working on Supercool and interviewing these different companies and these different entrepreneurs, you hear very often, it's the next generations, it's the younger generations that really care. They're going to figure everything out. Like, we're going to be okay because they're going to be on the case. When I look at entrepreneurs who are building the most consequential companies today at scale, almost to a T, they're over 50 years old. Like, almost to a T. Like, the most consequential companies. Rondo Energy, creating clean heat batteries for industry, right? The only way the guy knows how to do this because he failed for 20 or 30 years trying to figure out how to do that with, like, thermal solar. Or Zoom, Ritu Narayan started her company when she's 50, who's electrifying school buses across America, and did Oakland, the city of Oakland, the first major district to go entirely electric. Right? She just knew a lot, and she also had raised kids and knew the pain of actually like a school bus system that was broken. And so it's not to say that everyone doesn't have a place and that the younger generations aren't going to do a lot, but what gives me hope is that people of all ages that I see are using their skills and experience and staying in the game into their 50s, their 60s, and 70s, and building incredibly impactful, meaningful, inspiring businesses.
That's a really cool message. And I would say, as someone in approaching my mid 40s, I have some battle scars and some failed entrepreneur endeavors, Owen and I together. And, you like to think we can parlay those into future successes because of the lessons we learned.
You are primed for success, baby. Not that you haven't had it already, but you are teed up.
Well, Josh, it's been a pleasure. Thank you for coming on. How can our guests find you? Can you plug things? I mean, Supercool, the newsletter, or where do we actively find Josh and everything you're working on?
The best place to find the newsletter, the podcast, is our website, getsuper.cool. Of course, we're on every platform, so wherever your listeners want to find us, we're probably there. I am most active on social on LinkedIn. We're on other platforms too, but if any listeners want to connect with me directly, that would be a great place to do it, and I'd be happy to have those conversations.
Awesome. Well, thank you again, Josh. Thank you, Owen, and thank you everyone for joining. You can find Owen and I on LinkedIn, usually actively antagonizing the more talk, more complaining sustainability crowd. You can find this podcast and more great content at letstalkmoreaction.com. If you like the podcast, please subscribe, like, and share with your friends. And until next time, we encourage you to ask yourself, what are you doing to take action to make the world a better place?